You're now listening to the Something Good Podcast Network. Please press any key to continue.
A kiss, as defined by Dan Webster, is something pleasing, a caress, a gentle touch. But there's another kiss that isn't in Webster's.
Hey world, we're kids!
Some critics say they don't make music, they just make noise.
Yeah, Kiss sucks!
Kiss implies the extreme in the theatrics on stage, utilizing fire and smoke and bizarre costumes, and the ever-consistent, constant concealment of their true identities.
Speaking of which, Kiss is going to have its own comic book soon.
Take Kiss with you. It's fun. Show your friends and be the first. Now.
Oh my God, no time to turn!
And welcome again to No Time to Turn, a Kiss Nerd podcast.
Nerds.
And as always, I'm joined by Cap and Alex.
What's up, y'all?
What's up?
From the Something Good Network.
Yes. Tons of good shows on there, even though this one might be wrapping up.
Well, anyway. Well, end of the road, man.
Yeah, we actually commit to our conclusions.
Well, we're not there yet.
Touche.
There's still some road left. And,
are we going to keep paving the road?
Yeah, we're going to keep. Yeah, we're not going to talk about that in this episode.
Not yet.
But in this episode, we'll talk about something that's probably bound to be controversial in any circle you're in, and that's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Never mind Kiss's inclusion in it.
Just the establishment. Just brings up conversation.
You could do a whole podcast on just the Hall of Fame itself.
Well, if you look at this episode title.
Yeah.
Well, in the fall of 2013, the band was officially nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They had been eligible since 1999, but did not receive their first nomination until 2009.
Now, this was the era, at least in 2013 or whatever, this was when you could get fan-submitted votes for inclusions, or folks that were outside of the Hall of Fame, establishment.
Even that, though, was a bit of a farce. So the way it broke down, though, was all of the audience vote counted as one vote on the board. So it's like, even if, so if random chance, millions of people voted for one artist to get in, like the whole world collectively was like, yes, this artist deserves to get in. That counts as one vote on the board. It's ridiculous. Yeah. It's such a farce. Man, we're not getting into that.
Well, let's just look at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, like as an institution or whatever you want to call it. It should probably rightfully be called the Rolling Stone magazine Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That's the entity behind it, the corporate entity that put it together and propagates it. Now they go outside their sphere of influence or whatever you want to call it, and it's 600 votes roughly that decide who gets in and who doesn't. Little Steven Van Zandt made a pretty insightful observation. You can naysay it, but guess what? It's going to be the first thing they write in your epitaph.
Oh yeah.
And that's it's, for whatever it's worth, at the end of the day, it may well be the highest honor you can receive from the recording industry, probably even greater than that of the Grammy.
And it's one of those things where you see touring bands get announced where they say Rock and Roll Hall of Famers.
Yeah,
such and such.
They
now,
run
would you
with
really
that.
say it's more valid than a Grammy, or
how many Grammys? How many I like to always point at the Best New Artist Grammy. I mean, it is a deep list of one-hit wonders, here today, gone today, up to and including Milli Vanilli, who didn't even sing on their fucking record.
I think
the Grammys are to me, probably the least valuable, accolade. I mean, it's the Oscars of the music industry, but I don't think it's
the popular music trophy.
It's a popular. It really acquiesces to commercial success. It's the industry patting itself on its back because they moved a lot of units.
I mean, I think a lot of people would argue that the Hall of Fame is very similar.
I think, well, that's you know.
I was thinking the Joe Walsh bit where he just like he gets asked about it and he goes like, oh yeah, it was cool to do be a part of this, that, and the other, and you know, looks good on my resume.
Well, that's true, you know, but it would seem, and I don't know the criteria because I'm not on the, you know, I don't know who the nominating committee is.
It cycles through a lot.
That's the question mark. There's 600 people that get to vote on it, but how many people get to do the nominating? You know, it seems to me that any given act, the process to include or exclude any given act would have to be predicated on the idea of, you know, if this is a Hall of Fame, what you're trying to do is you're trying to set aside the exemplary acts of rock and roll, not necessarily how they did commercially, but what they did culturally, you know, the culture of rock and roll and how it impacted culture at large. But for that to happen, then by default, you're going to have a certain level of commercial success, but it doesn't always run concurrently, which is why you get acts like the Velvet Underground included, who did not sell a lot of records, were not a commercially successful act, but are immeasurably influential.
Pistols.
The Sex Pistols, another one album, it was commercially successful in Britain, but nowhere else. But I mean, you say Sex Pistols, and pretty much everybody at least knows their name. I think we talked about this on a previous episode. The Sex Pistols didn't sell, you know, 100,000 copies of Nevermind the Bollocks in America probably when it came out. I'm sure it's done, you know, it's been almost 50 years, so it's done way more than that then. Oh yeah. But at the time, it was kind of a commercial flop. That same year, a guy named Jerry Rafferty, who had been a member of Steelers Wheel.
Jerry Rafferty is famous for right?
But a lot of people don't even know. They can't associate that name with that song. Baker Street, he sold 5 million copies of just the single.
I believe it.
For Baker Street. But how many people, you say Jerry Rafferty, people, huh? Who?
I know it.
You say Sex Pistols, even though they know the Jerry Rafferty song first in their head, so there's that impact that, and like, to me, the Sex Pistols are kind of like really the beginning of the end of rock and roll. But that's a whole nother argument and debate.
But there's a whole other, but then on the flip side of the Hall of Fame discussion, they didn't attend and in fact left a message.
Yeah.
That they read out loud that would kind of reflect,
If you go to the museum, and it's been several years since I've been, but there is a part of the museum that is technically their quote unquote Hall of Fame, because the museum includes stuff that are bands that aren't actually in the Hall of Fame. There's also a museum, a rock and roll museum, so you can go see, there's a section dedicated to punk rock, and you can see, the jacket that Handsome Dick Manitoba wears on the cover of Dictators Go Girl Crazy. Dictators aren't in the Hall of Fame, but they're in,
Yeah, like the original guitars that Jerry and Doyle hacked up during the Danzig era are in there and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. And if you go through, there's a theater where they run a loop of all those, when they induct a band, they have a kind of I can't even speak, introductory film. And before they announce, the band that come on stage, they show those films, and then they show a little bit of their acceptance speech. It's like a running thing, a montage. When it comes to the Sex Pistols, all of that cuts out. It gets quiet. That thing comes up, that letter saying we're not coming, with no music, no accompaniment, nothing, and it just fades out, and then it goes to the next band. It starts right back
great. I love
That's all you get out of the Sex Pistols thing. There's stuff there that I don't know if they're the actual, they got them as supposedly the actual letters. There's a letter from Malcolm McLaren to Sylvain, trying to persuade him to come to England to join this band that he's helping manage called the Sex Pistols. I don't know if it's a photocopy of it. I'm sure they have the actual letter in their archive somewhere, but it's presented like it's the real thing. Anyway, I'm going on a tangent.
No, but also another notable one. At least they got these guys in pretty early. The Ramones.
Yeah, well, they were in first time.
Yeah.
There's a lot of first timers. I mean, you can't. That's another example. A band that was never really commercially successful, but again, immeasurably influential
and important.
So rock and roll culture has a lot of important. Stuff that I wouldn't even call it underground or alternative. I mean, I think certainly in the case of the Ramones, they thought they were going to be a successful commercial band. Didn't work out that way, but that's what they thought. And
unfortunately hung up their hat 2 years before they probably would have became superstars. Well,
yeah, but it would take them, 22 years. It was a long run. Johnny Ramone thought they were going to make, last 2 years, he was going to make $1 million and live off that the rest of his life. I mean, he honestly thought that was the way that was going to play out. He thought they were going to be the next Bay City Rollers. Hey Ho, Let's Go. The chant for Hey Ho, Let's Go was influenced directly by the Bay City Rollers. SATURDAY. And then that chant was recycled into the opening drum pattern for
Rock and Roll Radio.
Rock and Roll Radio.
Cap's brought up quite a few times, just saying how how bands like Rancid and all these others that were championing the Ramones name like a couple years after they called it quits. Where it's just like, again, you never know. Just like with the stock market, you never know. But it's like if they had just held out those couple more years, something could have happened.
Well, I doubt it. I don't think it would have ever happened. I think they would have been always operating at the level they operated at. But it's neither here nor there. We'll never know. But talking about the commercial acts, though, there are commercial acts that get in to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that I don't personally see where they had any real tremendous impact or influence. Yes, they were incredibly popular, but a band like Journey, I don't see other bands copying anything from Journey. Journey seems like they're a product of other stuff without really extending the lineage into something else. There's no line traced from Journey to something else to me. And I know this is going to probably raise a lot of eyebrows for some people, but I'd say more recently, I'd say the same thing about a band like the Foo Fighters. That's an end point. That's where the line stops. It's not going to expand from there. The stuff that you're going to, there's a point where it's like you're seeing this sort of end over. It's like you've reached a point where the stuff that's being influenced by that stuff is really being influenced by what came before it, and sometimes without any knowledge of what came before it. We saw that, but then again, this has been going on since the advent of rock and roll. We saw, there's a movie about a band called X, and this is not the Japanese band X. This is a Los Angeles band called X, and the singer is a woman named Exene Cervenka, and she makes a comment in a movie where she's like, I don't think having the influence of a British blues band is as good or as pure of an influence as having the actual blues artists that they derive their sound from.
Right. The Robert Johnsons and Delta Blues.
Yeah,
and all
it's
that.
better to go to the source, and you're going to get something, if you derive your influence from that. But that's not how rock and roll is. It really kind of comes off of,
the backs of what came before.
Yeah, it kind of, this is influencing that, and then that expands off of that. But there comes a point where I think you can only go so far with that before it starts imploding back in on itself. I saw a really interesting comment this week, coincidentally, and it kind of threw me for a loop. I'd never seen this before, and I don't know if this is actually going to turn into a media buzzword or not, but it was referring to the quote-unquote rock era. And it was even highlighted, so I clicked. I was like, what the hell, the rock era?
What time period?
And it's essentially being defined as a 50-year period from 1955 to 2005, where rock and roll was the predominant commercial music and driving force of popular culture.
Yeah, I remember.
And I thought, it's interesting because you look back and you often see the 20s. I mean, it's often referred to as the Roaring 20s, but it's also very often referred to as the jazz age.
Yeah, and there's still jazz circuits and stuff like that too.
You still have it, but it's not and so you're looking at this and you start realizing I can see that. I can see that most young bands today really are doing affectation. I see most of the bands that are successful that are working today have their roots prior to 2005. Any sort of commercial band, but even by the tail end of the 90s, you saw the rise of these bands like the Helicopters,
the Strokes,
and the Super Stuckers, and all of them are really kind of patterning themselves after patterning. Can't speak. I'm a broadcaster, right? A professional broadcaster.
Professional.
But they're patterning themselves after something that already exists. They're forming themselves to a form, and they're not even necessarily working that form. They're just aping the form. Yeah. And like with the Helicopters, the lead guy on that very consciously and very openly said, I wanted to expand an awareness of this stuff that we had discovered, and it was more obscure, like Detroit rock,
right?
To the point like Scott Morgan and the Fred Smith's the Sonic Rendezvous band. That was a big influence on the Helicopters.
Did a version on City Slang.
City Slang, and their whole reason to be was the Sonic Rendezvous band, and to another extent,
Radio Birdman in a lot of ways too.
But to another greater extent, Kiss.
Yeah.
And so, where does this put Kiss? Where did they? Where does this put Kiss? Do they contribute to this worldwide cultural lexicon? Are they? Are they both commercially and culturally worthy to be inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
I mean, us as fans, I would say absolutely.
I mean, I'll say, okay, I'll take the aspect of not as a fan. Let's look at record sales. Let's look at attendance records. Let's look at cultural significance. I mean, I can look at artists of the 70s and 80s that I may not be a fan of, but still go, that's culturally significant. Mm-hmm. I could say the same for Kiss.
With 4 of the most recognizable faces in popular music that probably, this is according to Gene, I remember hearing him say this in quotes, saying that they have sold more gold records, or they have more gold records than any other group.
You know what? There was a formal announcement by the RIAA, the Recording Industry Association of America, or whatever it is, where they actually formally announced that Kiss being the gold record champions. I meant to write that down. I might have it somewhere.
So I remember Gene saying
and it was around this time.
And I remember Gene saying that actually on the Kiss Symphony DVD. He walks off after the show and he says he's being super braggadocious post show. It's like, #1 group with gold record sales, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Kiss my ass.
Well, but see, again, they're also just as aware as anyone. I mean, that's a huge accolade. And again,
well, what's your opinion on that? So you asked us.
I have gone back and forth on this ever since, God, before they were ever nominated or even being, spoken of being nominated. Would they be important enough to be included? And given the influence, and we've talked about this in previous episodes from that early 90s period, that Hard to Believe covers album, then their own self-produced covers album, and just seeing that from that point on, I mean, I don't think I don't know if influential is the right word as so much as I'm having a brain fart. It's less influential than it is
kind of impactful,
or it kind of incites you. It motivates you. It's maybe not influencing you directly, but it makes you pick up the guitar.
Feel inspired.
It inspires you. That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you.
How many kids picked up a guitar because of Ace Frehley?
I mean, that's the immeasurable thing there. And I'm like, and I think they were important in the regards of a theatrical rock act, because a lot of the theatrical rock acts outside of Alice Cooper eventually kind of grew tired of it and dropped the theatrics. It got to be too cumbersome or whatever else.
Well, they did
didn't survive. Well, Kiss did too, to a point. But they came back to it because that was their bread and butter. And that all plays to a point here. But
and talking about cultural significance, if people want to kind of discredit the merchandising and the whole shtick of the whole thing, take that away. What about the rock and roll national anthem? Rock and roll all night. It's like, yes,
we declared rock and roll national anthem.
Well, the thing is like, we as fans are sick of that fucking song.
But everybody knows it.
Everyone knows it. It gets played in football stadiums. It's the main song that gets played on the radio. It's like, again, we can be sick of it, but just because we're sick of it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not culturally significant.
I'd argue that there have been Hall of Fame inductees that have gotten inducted for way less.
Well, that was kind of the point I was getting at. I think some of them get in because they have to, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, now that it has a museum, the museum has to generate income. Mm-hmm. And so they have to acquiesce to these commercial acts just as much as they do what they think is culturally significant.
And it's also televised now, too, these ceremonies.
What's interesting, though, is it's not televised at the same... Again, the Grammys get primetime... a block of primetime coverage every year. It gets put on national, on CBS or whatever.
The ratings always tank, but still a good spot.
I'm surprised that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame doesn't. It's moved from one channel to another. I think one year it was on like Bravo or something.
Yeah, it's always like HBO or something.
And it's never live
like
either.
It's never live. It's pre-recorded, edited. But before we get to the ceremony, some stuff is going on. Let's kind of touch on this.
There was so much going on leading up to this.
Yeah.
The hype around the Hall of Fame nomination before the official announcement of the induction just stirred so much.
Well, we'll get to that. But
discussion.
Before we even get to there, let's take a little side step here.
There's no time to turn.
Because in January of 2014, now that was the announcement of them being nominated. They haven't been announced as an inductee at this point. This was only the nomination. So in this build up before the announcement that they'll be inducted, there was a surprise appearance in Milan at the Men's Fashion Week, where Kiss appear as models for John Varvatos.
Yes.
And I guess this is some sort of loose tie-in with their Dress to Kill cover look. They're in suit and ties. And then they carry this over to New York, where they play at the Varvatos store in New York City. What is the Varvatos store in New York City?
Oh, here we go.
It is the former location of CBGB.
Yeah.
Which is the Cavern Club of America. It's kind of surprising to me that club was not preserved as on a national register, but
seems like you could thank the New York government for that one.
Well,
the property developers, or whoever.
Well, it is what it is. Now, some might claim this is sacrilege, and some might say bravo, but I don't really have any feelings about this one way or the other. They played the room that was CBGB's. They didn't play CBGB. They didn't play CBGB back in the day. They had already kind of advanced past that point.
It's kind of odd.
That would have been interesting, though, if like early Club Kiss had played CBGB's.
Well, they were about a year before that.
I was going to say,
and they probably would have had they.
They were already like stadium level at that point, right?
No, but I'm not exactly sure the exact opening date of CB's, but the first band I think of note to play there was Television. They were the first one to come in, because you know what CBGB stands for?
Country blues.
It's country, bluegrass, and blues.
Yeah, right.
That was the intended music for that venue. The guy that opened it wanted country, bluegrass, and blues,
and then you get this weird
guitar
rock band,
and then this band called Television show up and go, well, we play music.
We need a place to play.
and they had, of course, there was no clientele, and so he had nothing to lose. And then from that little seed sparked the American punk rock movement.
Yeah.
And we say punk rock, it needs to be noted that what a lot of people consider to be punk rock now was very, very, very different then, because
underground music.
Television doesn't sound like what you would think stereotypical punk rock is.
No.
Patti Smith Group doesn't sound like what typical,
Blondie.
Talking Heads didn't. Blondie. They were all it was a very diverse, all very different from one another.
Anything that wasn't the regular beaten path was punk rock.
Anything it wasn't anti-commercial. I don't think any of these groups were anti-commercial. They were just going
corporate
back,
rock.
They were John Doe from X, another great quote. The band X keeps coming back. He was like, we weren't against commercial success, we were against manufactured success, which of course that is the way the music industry works now. I mean, you've got American Idol and America's Got Talent and all this, it's
contests.
It's very convoluted. But here they are playing kind of a Hallmark venue, even though it's no longer really a venue. But and that didn't really seem to get a lot of play when it happened. I mean, it made some news headlines in the entertainment headlines or whatever, but it really
fashion magazines.
I don't remember seeing this being a really big thing.
No, but they did carry over the suits to the Kiss cruise, and they did a Dress to Kill themed cruise.
Were they wearing Barbados suits?
Yes, they were.
Oh, did they make a point to say these are Barbados?
Well, they didn't make a point to say it, but it was clearly the same suits from those photos. But it was kind of cool seeing Kiss.
I'm saying I didn't know if Barbados had some sort of corporate sponsorship behind the cruise, like
no,
a presence on the cruise, like their logo or whatever.
No, it was just Kiss was up there in full makeup with their boots, but in suits, and I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. So that's about it. The whole year of 2014 is pretty quiet otherwise. I don't have a lot of information or notes written for that. I don't know if you want to come back behind me and...
Yeah, for 2014, they did hit a tour. It is interesting to note that in January 2014, on the 25th, they played Dodger Stadium. But... It was an NHL halftime
I was going to say
that. You know what? I think I saw this. Yeah. Where they played Detroit Rock City.
Yes, it was Lick It Up, Rock and Roll, and I Love It Loud in Detroit Rock City. And it was the Anaheim Mighty Ducks beat the LA Kings 3-0. Cool. And that's where Kiss is, kicking off January 2024. Or 2014, rather.
I can see this as a managerial kind of decision. It's a profile. If does that get broadcast on television?
It did.
Yeah.
That's what it counts. Is you're on TV, you're in front of millions of eyes.
But I also just find it interesting. Rewind back to 1997. They're playing Dodger Stadium, sold out.
It wasn't sold out. It wasn't sold out. We talked about that. That was a heavily papered show, meaning lots of free tickets were given out.
But it's still a far cry from
asses and seats. Yeah. Asses and seats. That's what I'm getting at. But then a sold out show, but it's for the game and not them.
I'm sure a lot of the hockey fans were
the halftime show,
and I'm sure the hockey fans were like, "Oh, that's cool."
Yeah, like, all right. A couple months later, April 11th, 2014, they hop on the Jimmy Fallon Show. And they play King of the Nighttime World, Deuce, Black Diamond, Hotter Than Hell, and Firehouse.
See, that's funny because I have no memory of that at all.
So I remember the David Letterman appearance. I don't recall the Jimmy Fallon appearance at all.
I remember the Fallon appearance, and I remember hearing it and really going, ooh.
It was bad.
They didn't lip sync.
It was bad.
It was bad.
Is this where we start seeing the cracks in the live performances?
I feel like a couple episodes ago, it was when Paul had his heart thing.
That's right.
I feel like around then is when it started kind of starting. Around this time is because I remember the tour before, which was the Motley Crue Kiss tour. By that point, his voice had already been a topic of discussion. So now all of a sudden he's hopping on doing Hotter Than Hell.
Ooh.
Ooh, that one did not land well because there's a lot of Paul Stanley high vocalisms on the verses and look, gosh, you look high hell. Oh God, no. So I remember watching this one just kind of going, God.
I think I had my moment with that with the with one of the tours, watching footage of that, but we'll get to that.
And I do want to say that I feel like they're making these TV appearances because of the nomination.
So it's the nomination had already happened by this point, right?
It's probably garnering attention from for the producers of these shows.
Well, the nomination has already been released, correct?
Yeah,
like they haven't been said they're going to be in. Yes,
Yeah.
but they haven't been said they were in yet. This is like during the nomination voting period.
And I remember at this time we're starting to see a resurgence, if you will, of Kiss in popular culture.
And I think it was calculated because they wanted in for once.
I might have myself out of order here, and it probably very likely do, and this is my fault because I think it was in December. I've got December 16th. That it was announced that the band had won the fan vote for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inclusion.
That sounds right.
Beating out Nirvana and Deep Purple, which is interesting. But like we said earlier, that really essentially counts as a single vote.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know if that's still the case now, but
honestly, I think it is.
I think it still is. That means the fan vote counts as a single vote among the 600 other voters for inclusion. The band does not seem to care about any of this. They're speaking very critically of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and its induction process.
They're taking a fucking press tour just slamming these guys.
They are critical of the critics. A little bit of irony for those who enjoy that sort of thing. I mean, it comes off so fucking schoolyard bullshit. Like,
Paul was the biggest voice in the whole thing.
But is this was it around the nomination time where they got the appearance on Rolling Stone, or is that later on?
That's after they won, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
That actually happens the same week.
So
we'll come back to that. But so they are officially announced as they're announced as an inductee for this class of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Let's see other inductees for this class of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is Nirvana, Hall & Oates, Peter Gabriel, Cat Stevens, Linda Ronstadt, and the E Street Band. Yeah. Not Bruce Springsteen, but the E Street Band.
Which is kind of fucked up because Bruce got inducted in, 99 or his first year eligibility?
I don't know, but here's where you pause and you step back and consider again the idea of a culturally important group. I mean, probably going to invoke the ire. I like Bruce Springsteen.
I know where you're going
like
with this,
the E Street Band, but as a band, I mean, they're the fucking backing band. Yeah. They're important people, but and from what I understand, they end up eating up the lion's share of the time at this ceremony. But yeah. I'm like, if you're going to induct the band, they should have all been done at the same time. Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band. And the band never did anything as a separate entity. They don't exist outside of that context. So this seems like a really hackneyed, ham-fisted, stupid idea. Not because they're a bad band. They're a great band. And like I said, I really like Bruce Springsteen, but that should have been a package deal. Them getting their own singular honor is really to me, absolute bullshit.
But what about the Beatles and then the individual members getting their own?
Well, they got inducted as solo acts. It was all for their solo output. See, that's my point. The E Street Band never made a record as just the E Street Band.
Right.
If they did, you might have some wiggle room there. I don't see it, but there's a lot to be, again, this has always been this is a super controversial subject anyway, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, because there's a lot of people who are like, fucking Iron Maiden should be in the fucking Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, man. And I'm like,
and then you get a whole bunch of acts that are very far removed from rock and roll that are also in the Hall of Fame.
But the idea is it's an attitudinal idea, which I'm not going to argue that. I'm not going to debate that there's certain hip hop acts that are included, because attitudinally it's part of the rock and roll
conversation.
Yeah. So I think, and there is a place at the table for that. At first I understood, I was like, yeah, that seems like bullshit. But then later on, once you consider that argument, it's a valid argument, it's a valid debate, and therefore there's a valid seat at the table for it.
But probably the most important conversation after the nomination took place was who's going to play on stage. Are they going to play? What lineups are going to be?
That's where things start getting kind of squirrely. They are told the only members to be recognized are the original four.
Yeah.
Which, to me, that is the only reason why they're being even included in the discussion.
And then you get to another squirrely debate with the Hall of Fame, because when the Grateful Dead got inducted, they included everybody.
But that was going to be my argument.
The Red Hot Chili Peppers, same thing. Every lineup was part of it.
I don't think that had Kiss started in 1983, they would ever be in the conversation.
I'd agree with that 100%.
I don't think had Kiss started in 1983 that they would even have 1/10 of the fan base they have now.
Think of
everything. This cannot be understated, because this is my kind of thing about my whole argument about Kiss. Everything Kiss is all centered and built around that original era. And you can even argue it doesn't even have to be those original four. You could make a debate that had they had Tommy Thayer and Eric Singer from the very beginning, that it would still be that original era. It had everything that anyone ever wants to think about or talk about is built around the original line or the original era of Kiss, that makeup era. The non-makeup era and everything post, including the reunion, including Psychos, all of that is irrelevant. That's just the aftermath of what their career was, which was the first 8 years.
And I would 100% agree with that, but I wish I was more well-versed on Red Hot Chili Peppers and Grateful Dead, because I feel like the exact same argument could be made for those bands. I highly doubt that all of those members that got inducted were very valuable players to the longevity of Chili Peppers or Grateful Dead. So by that same token, why shouldn't Eric Carr get a little nomination? Why shouldn't Bruce get recognized? Why shouldn't Eric get recognized? They were all part of what made Kiss continue to thrive, what better or worse, to this very day.
Well, we talk about 1983 being the time frame where, like, not only Kiss but a lot of rock and roll that came out in that time period is not going to get any love from the Hall of Fame, whether it's 80s Kiss, Quiet Riot, Warrant, none of these bands.
But that's because they're not important.
Right, but Kiss was important, much like to a lot of people the Grateful Dead are important, to a lot of people Red Hot Chili Peppers are, but I doubt that all of those members are as important as that key group that everyone thinks of when they think of the Dead or Chili Peppers.
I don't see a lot of major lineup shifts with the Dead, but I would say, and I don't know a lot about the Grateful Dead, but what little I do know, I would say that everyone that was involved in that were key members in their own way. I can see that argument for the Dead. The Red Hot Chili Peppers I know nothing about. With them,
it was like this current lineup that was the lineup that crossed over, and then everybody else that got inducted was what formed the band and what made like the early albums.
I don't see. As far as I can tell, they've largely the only turnover spot the Dead had was in the keyboard position. And
I couldn't tell you anything about that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They didn't have like 8 guys. I don't know. But I'm just. I can. That's a fair. I guess it's a fair argument. But I just don't see them as being important players as to the rationale and reasoning of. I can't speak to other groups, but in regards to Kiss, which I can speak to because I have some knowledge on the subject.
I'm Kiss nerd. Goddammit.
I don't see any reason to include Eric Singer because Eric Singer is an employee. He doesn't, he's wearing literally the costume and design. He's dressing up as cosplay Peter Criss. Tommy Thayer is dressing up as cosplay Ace Frehley. They've not even had their own identities. They're not, and which of course, because that's what Kiss is selling now is just that brand, the brand identification, that brand, whatever.
The memory of 1977.
And so it's like
Spirit of 76.
Right.
And again, and it's not because I'm shitting on Bruce Kulick, but I mean, like I said, had Kiss started in 1983, no one would give a shit. They didn't do anything. That people, they sold million. We've already talked about this. They weren't on par with all the other 80s acts that were selling 4, 6, 8, 12 million copies. Kiss were doing 1 million. And
I love how this entire time we mentioned Bruce Kulick, Eric Singer, Tommy Thayer, Eric Carr. Still haven't mentioned Vinnie Vincent.
Well, Vinnie Vincent. Well, I mean,
I don't think he was ever in any conversation at the time either.
he was there for the blink of an eye, and I mean, he served his purpose when he was with the group, and he contributed heavily to what they were doing. But again,
that could be a fair argument. A lot of the Vinnie Vincent songs are still played to this day. War Machine, Lick It Up.
Right.
He was a valuable contributing member.
I agree.
Shouldn't he be included as much as they hate his guts?
No, because he's, again, all of us still is he comes after that point.
Right,
again,
but
I don't
if we were
think
using
that
Chili
even
Peppers and Dead as a benefactor,
I
talking
don't
about
know.
contributing.
I said I can't speak to that. I don't even know who's been. I don't know anything about that. I mean,
I don't either.
To
But
me,
you're
the Red
saying,
Hot Chili Peppers are a frat boy band. They're
They
just
are.
completely irrelevant to anything. I don't understand why they're even in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah, but what I'm just saying is, if we're talking about though, the importance of contributing to the band, because you were saying just a little bit you knew about Grateful Dead is that you were like each member was a contributing member.
But
well, if Vinny was a contributing member to the point where one of those songs are still being played to this day,
but I'm saying the point is the Grateful Dead has not made a new album since 1987, and that was the first album they had done in 10 years or whatever. All their albums, and that was both a culturally and commercially successful record of its time.
That was their only hit, oddly enough.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a different thing. The Dead works on a whole different level. They had a complete different impact, but an impact nonetheless, and it was always an important impact. Lick It Up wasn't as near as important of a record. So yeah, you had people that were contributing, but what I'm saying is they didn't. These are people that contributed to the whole overarching arc of what the criteria would be, but again, pulling back again to what I'm saying, the argument that would support your end would be, again, the E Street Band, important band for Bruce, but they never did anything. I don't understand why they're even being inducted. I don't understand. After that, I guess all of the rest of this I can see. I'm not, Linda Ronstadt is on for me, if I was sitting here, and it's not because, I mean, she was really good at pulling out, basically, I mean, she basically,
Hank Williams songs.
Well, anyway, it was just, I mean, she basically did covers.
Yeah.
But she also handpicked and found all the best shit. She was really fucking smart. And really talented. And
those records sound pretty fucking solid for that time period.
But I don't know that I would include her as, she was, she had her impact, I guess, to a certain degree. So I don't know. We don't
get paid to make these decisions.
I know. I'm not on but I would be like, I don't know. I think before I went with Linda Ronstadt, I might go with someone else. Cat Stevens.
I mean,
I don't know a lot about Cat Stevens. I know some of the hits.
Is it kind of one of those things too, where you got to pick guys that have songs that people know for the TV time?
Well, that's
and
what
all
I'm
that
saying.
too?
That's my point. Is they've got this museum. They have to acquiesce to the commercial thing. They have to bring people in because most people aren't thinking about that stuff. They're again. You got people wandering in, going, "God damn, they ain't got Megadeth in here. They sold a bunch of records, man. They're a hit band, man." And it's like, no, they're not important. They're just not. I'm not saying they're
fired.
not. Look,
I agree.
I'm not saying they're a bad band. I'm not saying that. You got to understand. But on that, again, on this, it's an intangible, and it's how do you quantify it? But it's this cultural and commercial thing. It's like where you can point and go, that changed a lot of shit. That influenced or impacted a lot of shit. That inspired a lot of shit. That's a band that's important. They are a bright star in the sky. Then there's other stars that might be in the sky that aren't as important or are as, they're not making, what we're looking at is constellations here in the sky. There's a billion stars in the sky, but there's only 12 constellations or whatever it is. I don't know. I'm not an astronomer, but
the other big hoopla going around this time is it is tradition that the nominated bands play a song or two. So now that Kiss is being inducted, and it's being made very clear that only the original era, Gene Simmons, Paul Stanley, Peter Criss, and Ace Frehley are being inducted, the conversation has now shifted to, are we going to see the original members play one more time?
Well, the Hall of Fame committee is only interested in having the original band perform in full costume. And this quickly becomes a debacle. Kiss are willing to perform in full costume, but not with the original members. They want the current lineup to play. They're fine with the other guys receiving, being on stage and receiving the statue, but they do not want to play with them, which seems to me kind of. I get it. They probably feel like, well, that's kicking the teeth to the guys we have now. And then I think there might have been a compromise offered where they would have the current lineup with the two other guys joining them, and so that would have been weird to see two Peter Criss guys and two Ace Frehley guys.
Yeah.
Only one Peter Criss and only one Ace, but with these, what's the other guys dressed up like them for?
Well, the prevailing rumor on that was going to be that Tommy and Eric would still be in the makeup, but Ace and Peter would be on stage in their regular clothes.
Oh, see, that's even worse.
And it's also important to note that the main person really saying no to the reunion
is Paul
Stanley.
Yeah.
Gene, and this is what always stoked the fire. Anytime Gene was asked, he kind of gave the non-answer, leaning more toward just
never say never.
Yes, it was still a Kiss is Tommy and Eric and Paul and me, yada yada yada, but and the Hall of Fame is a joke, yada, yada, yada. But, never rule it out. I think it would be nice. One last time could never hurt. And then Paul would be asked, he's like, no.
Yeah. So
when you break up with your girlfriend and you decide to go back out to dinner with her, within the first few minutes you realize why you broke up with her to start with. And that's the funny thing about this is we can't really do it again with the original.
See, Gene always wants to keep those doors open because he knows the original lineup, no matter how good it was or it would be, will draw money.
Well, I would have been interesting to be a fly on the wall to listen to these guys go back and forth about this, because it seems to me Gene was very much, if we're going to do this, let's do it with the original guys. Gene seems very pro original lineup.
Around this era,
draw money.
Around this era,
no, I don't even think it has anything to do with that.
No, I was going to say I'm going to pull into something different. I might be a couple years off, and I should double check that actually before I go too deep into it. But this fact or not, Gene around this point has kind of had a heel turn with his personality. You know how he's usually very grandiose, I am Gene Simmons, fuck you, give me your money kind of thing? Mm-hmm. Around this time period, he's become a lot more humble and a little bit more graceful during interviews. Like he kind of hit that old man, thankful, grateful stage.
Well, you know what I think was the launching of that was his TV show. And, we haven't talked about that because I purposefully wanted to avoid going down those little side alleys. But one thing I noticed about his TV show was he allowed himself to be the butt of the joke.
Yeah. He's still dad at the end of the day.
And that's a brave spot to take. But, in that show, I mean, quote unquote reality series, obviously they're stage setups.
But this is also the same time period where Paul Stanley put out his memoirs, and it was kind of put more on Front Street that Paul is the brainchild, the head honcho of the band,
through
more
his
so
eyes.
than
That's been, I think,
that was started getting pushed a little more.
I know, but I think we've talked about that on this show, that there was a conscious, I don't know if it's conscious, but it seemed like a conscious shift where Paul kind of took control of the band while Gene kind of pursued other interests outside the band and was content to let the band, roll under the inertia of its own weight. If that makes sense. And I think that's true to this day. I think Gene still looks back wistfully at that original era and sees that it was that chemistry with those four people. And I know that he doesn't, I think he understands it's like, it sucks that we can't make this work. We're all grown adults here. Paul's like, it doesn't work, and it doesn't suck that it doesn't work because it works great the way it is.
A car only runs with 4 inflated tires. If one tire goes out, Paul loves his analogies.
I know, right?
To start out with, the funny thing is,
it's all endless justification because, why does he have to continuously justify that? Because he knows that the demand that exists is for that original lineup. That's again why I say you can't understate this. That's what everyone wants. That's so rare and so unique and so special. So you talk about the Grateful Dead, or you talk about no one gives a goddamn about those original lineups. They're content to have what they have. And there's a segment of the Kiss audience that is content to have what they have. But by and large, the ultimate core audience fucking want the real shit, because that's what was so special, and that's what makes it so unique and so different. The only other band I could think of that would have this problem, had they existed and replaced members, would be the Beatles.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Because even the Stones were able to trade out members
Guitar
and do
players,
it successfully.
Bass players, now drummers.
Yeah, and I would never have thought they would have continued without Charlie Watts.
I know.
There was a kind of a saying once saying, "No Charlie, no Stones."
But that concert demand is there, so.
Well, yeah. So, but there's no other band that really enjoys that kind of appreciation and notoriety. And what is it about those four guys? Why is it that? Because they created something that was so singularly unique. Even in using the theatrical elements that maybe they had borrowed from other influences, they put it in a way that had never been done before and never has been done since. I can't think of another band that's pulled it off. Doing that, nobody. And so it's like, it's so unique and so special and so, unassailable. This is what it is. And if you can't get those four guys to perform
one song,
it just seems like if they're going to go do this for the sake of the fans.
Yeah, because that was the other thing, is they were just like, we don't care about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
We're
it's
just
not
doing
for
it
us.
for
We're
fans.
doing it
Yeah.
this is for them. Because we couldn't care less, but this is validating for our fans.
No, they're doing it for themselves here at this point, because what do? They take their marbles. They don't go home, but they just go, well, we're not going to play.
Yep.
Which is, to me,
that's disrespectful to the fans. That goes against what he's saying.
That is not an insult to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That is an insult to the fans, the people that want to see this at least one more time. And it probably, let's be honest, had they gotten together and performed,
it would have been the last.
It would have been the last time, but it also probably wouldn't have been very good.
No,
but I think to get through one, what would they have played?
Rock and Roll All Night.
Yeah. No, I know that, but let's say most bands usually play at least 3 songs, right?
That's true, yeah.
What would be the other 2 songs? I would imagine
Deuce and Detroit.
I would imagine Detroit Rock City and Beth.
Oh no, not Beth. That wouldn't have happened.
If they had Peter, we'd have what other? That's their signature hit song. There has to be.
I don't see them doing that.
It would have to
in
be.
any universe.
Gene
hates that song.
It doesn't
so
matter.
Much.
I would bet that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame committee would have came to them and said, "You can play any 3 songs you want, provided that it's Detroit Rock City, Beth, and Rock and Roll All Night."
God help us if you play Christine 16.
Yeah, that would have gone over in the Me Too movement, right? I don't usually say things like this to girls your age, but
Ew.
when I saw you coming out of school that day,
You do that a little too well.
So
Like
the
Dennis Hopper
question,
in Blue Velvet.
so at the end of February, they announced that the band will not perform at all.
And Ace is getting on Eddie Trunk talking about it. Peter's getting vocal on different radio stations. So you're even hearing them talk
This
about
is
it.
business as usual. They snipe at each other all the time. It's and again, this is so schoolyard. It gets a little exhausting listening to these guys cry about, oh, we're millionaires, but
They're not talking on the phone with each other. They're not in the same room. They're not saying a word to each
They're
other
not in the
until
same fucking car.
Well,
until
I think
they
at
get
some
to
point,
the fucking room itself for the ceremony.
and I don't remember when I saw this, but at some point, Paul Stanley made a comment about Peter Criss, just saying, you know what, I don't like the guy.
Yeah.
Why would I want to play music with a guy I don't like?
Yeah.
I mean, he's pretty upfront about it. He doesn't like Peter.
And you have to at least, it's like as much as you may not want to hear it, you at least have to semi-respect the fact that he's like, look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I just don't like the guy.
And that I can understand. But again, if you're going to do something like this, and especially if you're doing it, quote unquote, for the fans, this would be the time and place to do it.
Bite your tongue, smile, put on the clown white,
tell
rock it
everyone,
out.
listen, this is it. This is the last chance anyone's ever going to get. But see, I don't think they
And
want
he
to.
can even make it his own self-serving thing and be like, this is for the fans. This is for you. I don't
agree.
like this.
Judas Priest just did this. They just got inducted, and they got KK Downey back on stage, who went through various lawsuits and like this, that, and the other, and it got ugly. But they respected the fans enough to all get on stage to play a few songs.
Well, I mean, hell, Metallica, when they did their big 3-day 30th anniversary extravaganza, they had Dave Mustaine up to play, early Metallica stuff. So it's like, again, if fucking Mustaine can get on stage with Metallica during their 30th anniversary festival, it's like, Jesus Christ.
Well, I think the reason why, and with Kiss, it's always second guessing. We've talked about this too. They're always second guessing. That's a card they still have to play. Are we going to see them use it? I don't know. But
I'd like to discuss that and further on the next episode.
But it is a card they have to play. And why would they
2014?
And why would they play it in 2014 for a single audience? I mean, obviously it'll be a massive television audience, but it's not a massive television audience because these are these shows are being shown on at this point it was being shown on Trio or Bravo or some.
Most people are watching on
cable,
YouTube days later.
Days later, but
Alternate universe.
even so, why would you play that card when you could make way more money off of on a much grander scale than this? I don't think you can. I don't think that there's any more grander scale for them to bow out with the original guys than at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That's something that will be talked about and would have been remembered forever.
And right there, you just said, I thought about this as you were talking about that. That might be part of the reason. That's what I'm saying. If Kiss had gotten back together and played that show,
it wouldn't have had near the same impact if they do it again.
You're right, but that wasn't what they were thinking. It was, we're not going to let the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, this establishment that's pushed us around for so long,
right? We're not gonna
have the victory,
right,
of having the original members, because exactly what you guys said, low ratings. If this original lineup holds the weight that we do believe that it does, could you say that may have been one of the highest rated episodes or ceremonies for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
I thought about that too.
Exactly. Why would Paul Stanley, of all people, allow the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to take credit for getting the original members back together when the band themselves can't do it?
That's very valid.
I didn't think about that at all until just now.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. That is excellent. So the question now is, why even bother attending the ceremony?
To throw dirt in people's eye.
Which
is exactly what Paul did. Gene went up. He was extremely respectful. I loved Ace and Peters.
So let's talk about this. The event is held on April 10th at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn.
Peter's hometown.
Yeah.
He even says that on his speech.
It's interesting here. Tom Morello of Rage Against the Machine inducts Kiss. And I thought that was a curious choice. I was like...
Yeah, because you
how
think
did he get...
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just... how did he get chosen? Why was it him?
Because Foo Fighters were being inducted that night, so...
Foo Fighters weren't being inducted. It was Nirvana.
Oh, well, he was involved with something.
Oh, you think, Dave Grohl could...
Dave Grohl so would have done it, but I bet you because he was involved
I don't know that
with
Dave
the ceremony.
Grohl's that big of a Kiss fan, is he?
Oh yeah. He's on those on those docs.
Yeah, and he had Paul Stanley up on stage for his birthday party.
Yeah.
Talked about getting the Kiss radio and shit like that in interviews.
Who else besides Tom Morello would have been a good choice to introduce them?
Oh man,
or induct them, I guess.
Movie star. I mean, you got movie stars. You've got comedians.
Who? I can't see it. I mean, generally it's another musician. It's never a movie star or an outside. I mean, I wouldn't say never. I don't know of anybody else other. It's usually a musician inducts another musician.
The musician doesn't immediately come to mind, but I have two people that would be kind of off the wall choices. Mm-hmm. One, and he's a fan, Nicolas Cage. Mm-hmm. That would have been interesting. And two, if they had not been bickering like little school children for 10 years prior, Eddie Trunk.
Well, he was there too, hanging out with Peter Criss.
He was there hanging out, but he didn't induct and introduce.
Has he ever inducted anybody? That's why
I don't think he's that big of a media figure to get that kind of accolade.
Usually another musician.
Alice Cooper.
That would have been a good idea. Yeah. Alice or
Rob Zombie. But when you think Rage Against the Machine, you don't think Kiss.
Yeah, but to his credit, I think that guy delivered a really great induction speech.
Very passionate.
And you know what? And a lot of people are kind of downing on Tom for being the guy to give the speech. But at the same token, I see this as no different than It's Hard to Believe. A group of people in this music genre that you wouldn't fully expect showing love to Kiss. Rage Against the Machine was birthed straight out of that late 80s, early 90s grunge movement, which is the Hard to Believe tribute.
Well, they weren't really a grunge band, but...
No, but they were birthed out of that movement. That's what I was saying. Era, exactly. Yeah, so for someone from that era, the next step of that era, to now also be campaigning and championing Kiss... I don't know. I thought that was kind of cool. And it's by the same token of fast forward to today... Green Day is covering Rock and Roll All Night, and it's a part of their ongoing set list. So I think it's just kind of cool seeing some bands that usually maybe have kind of gave the middle finger to it, or kind of shied away from it, maybe kind of owning up to it a little bit more, because that whole crowd, whether it be the Rage crowd or the Green Day crowd, would kind of turn their noses up at Kiss. Oh, it's that dad rock, oh, it's just those kids and clowns in makeup. Well, all of a sudden now two of their biggest guys are sitting here going, "No, kids, Kiss is cool."
Well, I don't know that. I wonder if they chose him or if he was chosen for them. That's what I'm like. I wonder how they get to come to that, because
he was probably the only person on the committee that wanted to.
Thinking about it,
he's on the committee.
You can think about it though. I mean, you could just as easily have seen Lenny Kravitz induct Kiss. You could have easily. I wouldn't say Garth Brooks, because that's outside rock and roll.
Would you say that Lenny Kravitz still has any sort of cultural relevance as much as Rage maybe still does? Like, you still hear kids talk about Rage.
About the same.
Lenny Kravitz, no, not nearly as much.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I'd say about the same.
I think kids talk more about Rage.
Rage is packing fucking arenas and stuff like that now with these reunion shows.
Lenny's almost talked about in that guy.
He's doing TV shows and movies.
Well, each member gets up and speaks. Gene opens. He's the first one up. And he opens by thanking, straight out of the gate, Ace and Peter. Very gracious. And it just seems real clear to me that he prefers that original lineup. He seems to hold a lot of love and respect for Peter and Ace, for whatever headaches they caused, for whatever, it just, all his stupid arrogant put downs of Ace and Peter. You know, you can tell though when it comes down to the brass tacks, you know, to him, I think to Gene, that is Kiss. And I know
Kiss.
that Gene Simmons of Kiss. And
We
in
had
this
done one of
case,
those in a few years.
Kiss is Ace, Peter, Gene, and Paul. And you know, that just seems very evident when he because he gets very wistful about that era. And
He got a little choked up. He got a little misty.
I wouldn't say he was. I always wonder if that's a little bit of his acting ability to do that. But I'm just saying, anytime he talks about the old original era, I mean, I think he has at least some generalized understanding of how important that was. Peter speaks next. He very importantly thanks Bill Aucoin.
Yep.
I was surprised he was the only one that did.
I was gonna say.
And,
I was expecting Paul to.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that. But he thanks Bill Aucoin, and he notes the band wouldn't have existed without him, and that's very important. You know, if there was to be a fifth member of Kiss inducted, I would have been like, Bill Aucoin's the guy that really probably needs some sort of recognition. Maybe not inducted to Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but he needs some sort of. They have some sort of secondary induction, you know.
And what was cool is when Peter mentioned Bill, and I think he also mentioned Sean, didn't he?
No, I didn't hear him say that.
Okay. Well, at least when he mentioned Bill, the crowd did clap. Like
Yeah.
they knew the
They know
name,
the
and they
name.
were like, "Yes, thank you for mentioning him."
He also proclaims himself as the Catman.
and he'll always be the cat
And
man.
how he'll always be the Catman, which is a kind of a dig at their continued use of his makeup.
I love
Ace,
it though.
Ace gets up, and he's very funny and very endearing and very witty, as always.
Gets the biggest pop from the audience.
Gets the biggest pop from the audience because he has the most personality of the four, seems the most genuine.
I can't say a thing without these glasses.
You even hear a guy in the audience going,
Fucking Ace, man.
He's that, and you know what? Fucking Ace is right.
Yeah.
You know, that's instead of fucking A, it ought to be fucking Ace. Because they're all kind of corny and stupid, and the stuff they do now, like Ace's stuff he does now, is so bad.
You never liked any Ace's stuff.
His solo album in '78 is fucking
classic.
top notch, great. Everything else, I don't know what happened there, but it's not good.
he's just playing covers,
But
he's
you know,
happy.
He's funny, and and we hear all these nightmare stories how he's rude to the fans, and we hear that about all of them though.
Even most recently,
and
we've
I'm
heard
just
it.
like, you know what?
He's
I
old
don't
and cranky. Leave him alone.
You know what? I don't feel that he's obligated to be nice to me at this point. I don't.
Yeah,
you know what? I
too.
got what I want out of it, and again, we'll go into that on the next episode. But Paul's speech, you know, I've had a lot of mixed feelings about this because when he first did it, I thought, you know, right the fuck on. But this time I was looking at it, and you know, he's talking about the fans being the ultimate final word on who isn't or is worthy of induction. He's basically putting the middle finger up to it. And this seems like the most ungrateful, self-serving, obnoxious.
Well, he's not grateful.
He isn't. And I don't think it makes it just feel like this is the wrong place and time to do this, because it makes it sound like you're ungrateful towards, you know, the fact that you've even been brought to the show. You're lucky to even be here. Again, little Steven Van Zandt, and I opened with this. That's the first thing they're going to write about you in your obituary. It's going to be on your epitaph.
Well, Paul doesn't want the importance
you know
to be
what?
there.
Well, he thinks he's more important than that. And guess what, Paul? You're not. You're not.
So you're not Mick Jagger.
You're not
John
Mick
Lennon.
Jagger. You are Paul fucking Stanley. And Kiss was great, but the Kiss that, you know, it probably eats at his craw somewhere that he has to know the only reason why he's standing on that stage is because of those other three guys that are there with him, and not the other guys sitting at the tables below. That's just the fact.
And it's like Gene understands it, and that's why
Gene
he's at
understands
peace at it.
Yeah, and Paul will never be at peace with that, you know. And I don't. It just, to me, this time, you know, because I haven't watched this induction speech since they did it, And I'm just like, Jesus, Paul, shut the fuck up. Be grateful. And he's not. He's arrogant. He's smug. He's condescending. He's a jerk. There's nothing cool here. He's just being a fucking prick for no good goddamn reason.
And you know what? And there still could have been a way for him to give a middle finger while being great. Because
you can't. There's room for him to do that.
And it's very odd because usually Paul is very articulate. He's usually pretty good.
He was
with his
articulate.
word, but he still went about it. Oh no, it didn't feel very articulate to me.
It just sounded. It was just self-serving, and it's just.
And that's why to me it didn't feel articulate. If he was being the true Paul Stanley that knows how to kind of cut it with some words, he could have found a way to give them a middle finger while still propping up the idea that they're there a little more. It's just his own arrogance and just hate for that whole committee, I think, clouded his whole speech. When he could have actually made kind of a, almost like if you wanted to do like those YouTube top 5, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame moments, I think it could have been up there number 2 with Sex Pistols being number 1. For just like kind of being like, yeah, we're here, but fuck this establishment. He could have been a lot better with it.
I don't know. I think it was unnecessary. I think at this point, again, it's if he feels that strongly about the fans, it would have been focused on that to a degree that was more celebratory and less fucking wagging your finger at the, there allows for a certain room of contempt there. I don't disagree with that. I just think that the way he did it, again,
very childish, very immature,
was pretty immature. But this is notable for another major reason, and kind of depressing in a way. This is the last time that the 4 original members were ever on stage together. Probably will be the last time the 4 original members will ever be on stage together. And this is the closing of an era. I mean, this isn't just this is the closing of a book. I mean, this is if they're never to get together again, everything that was, again, I hate sounding like a Birkin record here, but everything that made this, the reason why we're sitting here,
talking of having a podcast on
39 episodes into a podcast is because this was a movement. It really was. It was a movement, much like Beatlemania, and it will never be duplicated. That whole era will never. I can't think of any other group that really rivals that in the time since. And you'll have sparks of it. You'll have groups that enjoy moments of massive success, but to the point where you've got, that kind of a dedicated following. There was Beatlemania, and then there was Kiss, and there are bands that have their dedicated. I mean, I'll even count Deadheads. Following the Dead around. There's not a lot of that. You just don't see it very often.
You see it a lot kind of in pop music when the flavor of the month boy band pops out. You get it for a minute.
You get it for a minute. That's what I mean. You get the little sparks of it.
But say, if you're going to dress up, say for Halloween, people are going up as kids for Halloween. But with AC/DC, you got one member with a costume. Guns N' Roses, you got Axl and maybe Slash
top hat, long curly hair, sunglasses.
Those bands all have very dedicated fan bases, but it's just not. It doesn't have the same kind of aura or same magic to it. There's something that was very special about what Kiss was doing. I mean, even Alice Cooper. And I love Alice Cooper, especially the original Alice Cooper group. It doesn't sustain in that same level. It was a very special moment. It existed in its time, and maybe it shouldn't have existed past its time. We could even say it existed a little bit longer than it should have. And I'm not talking about post makeup era. I'm just saying even in the makeup era. But that's all stuff we can talk about as we kind of roll down to the end of the road, which we will examine a little more at length.
Although we're forgetting one important thing in this era with the Hall of Fame
the Rock and Roll, the Rolling Stone
cover, the only time that Kiss has ever been on the cover.
That's true. That came out the same week that they were inducted. And again, I think it's interesting. Like I said, this Rolling Stone controls it. It's the Rolling Stone Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And it's the first time they've ever paid any kind of serious attention to Kiss. And I think that's also noteworthy only because of the fact that if you wanted to include any of the other acts being inducted that night, they could have just as easily been on the cover. But it wasn't Cat Stevens on the cover. It wasn't Linda Ronstadt on the cover. It wasn't Hall & Oates. It wasn't Nirvana.
It wasn't Tommy Thayer.
And it wasn't Tommy Thayer and Eric Singer either. It was a classic shot of Kiss.
It was Dressed to Kill a Live era Kiss.
And, you know, it's a special thing. It was great, you know, and this is really the closing of that book. And the inevitability at this point that they're going to reach their end point was obvious even at that juncture, even though it's taken several more years. But we'll talk about that more on the next episode of No Time to Turn, and which might well be the last episode of No Time to Turn.
Look, this is the end of the episode. I'll bitch for a second. I've tried to keep this show going. I've been like, no, we could do more episodes.
End of the road.
But executive producer over here has decided, nah, we're not doing this Kiss farewell shit where we're padding out the ending.
Well, I mean, we'll talk about that on the next episode. So hopefully y'all join us for the end of the road. And for Cap and Alex, I'm Russ, and we'll see you next time on No Time to Turn.
Thank you for listening. Please insert another coin by supporting the show for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/somethinggoodnetwork.